Hey everybody, my name is Ryan Fuller. Welcome to TriStar South. Today is our first inaugural episode. We're very blessed to have Jim and Robert Cortner here with us with More Cortner Funeral Home. Of course, my guest Sam is here as well. I don't know how fitting it is to start off a podcast series with a business that specializes in the end.
With a dead business?
So I guess we'll just jump right into it. Once again, thank y'all for being here, 100%. So Jim or Robert may give a comment on this. Tell us a little bit about how y'all got started here at the funeral home.
Well, I think the part of our family is kind of interesting getting started in it because, of course, my dad, Bob Cortner, has been pretty much a fixture here for almost 60 years. And he vacationed in Franklin County. He had relatives that lived here. His mother was born in Sherwood, Tennessee. So my dad grew up in Donaldson, Tennessee, which is outside of Nashville. And they lived there because my grandfather was a railroader and he worked out of Union Station and Radnor Yards in Nashville. So that's why they lived in that area. And that's where my dad went to high school. But he spent all his summers growing up in Franklin County. And he knew from an early young age he did not want to live in Nashville. And he wanted
Can't
to
blame
live.
him on that.
Yeah.
No, I mean, and I told him though, I said, well, when you were growing up and living in Donaldson, that was smaller than what Winchester is today. And it really was back then. I mean, it's hard for us to think about that. But he grew up in a small town high school. I mean, Donaldson was relatively small. And
So how, if he vacationed here, I guess, not to try to make things go along, I'm just trying to put the pieces together. How did that equivalate into him getting a funeral home?
well, it kind of happened because all of the first funerals that he went to were in Winchester.
Okay.
So coming back for relatives' funerals, that's how he met the Moores and Mr. Moore, and Watson Moore was Mr. Moore's son. A lot of people get that confused because they think, we've got Watson Funeral Home now. And back when Roy Watson had Watson Funeral Home, Watson Moore had the Moore Funeral Home. So people used to get things confused and people got sent to the wrong places sometimes because they'd say, I want it to go to Watson's, but they were talking about maybe Watson Moore instead of Roy Watson. So
Speaking from experience, it's a lot better to go to the wrong funeral home than to carry the procession to the wrong cemetery.
That's right.
Yeah, it is. It's a little bit easier to fix at that point. But my dad, coming to funerals down in Winchester and Franklin County, he kind of got introduced to the profession that way. And he just had a high respect. And he just thought, it was a dignified profession. It's something that is always needed. And it intrigued him from about 6th, 7th grade on. And in fact, he's told me stories about riding bicycles out here in front of this building, in front of 300 First Avenue, saying and telling the people that his friends that were with him down here saying, I'm going to work in that building one day. And they were like, you're crazy. That's a funeral home. You don't want to work in a funeral home. He's not, no, that's what I'm going to do. So that's kind of unique, I think, that he made that decision and that's what his dream was and he wanted to do from that early of an age. So down in Nashville, he got a part-time job with the Hibbett, York, and Haley Funeral Home, and that was in Donaldson, where he grew up. And he made ambulance calls there because back in those days, the funeral homes were the ambulance service. They had a car. They were the only people in town that had a car big enough to.
That wasn't, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm 36, so I was 88. That wasn't too far prior to the mid-80s.
It was in my life. I was born in 1971, and my dad made his last ambulance call here in 1973. So the Franklin County ambulance service started in 1973. So.
And that, of course, like looking back at photographs, like really, genuinely speaking, an ambulance was just a white hearse, correct?
Well,
it was.
Yeah, it was. Because when they got out of it, the ambulance service vehicles looked just like the funeral vehicles did. Cadillac were the first ambulances that were purchased by the Franklin County ambulance service. So they were basically a hearse ambulance combination, but you could use them as a straight ambulance. Theirs were outfitted not to ever do a funeral with, where the funeral homes, they had removable panels on the side. So like you see on a hearse, the little bar that's on the side of them, the little landau panel, those like were removable and they had glass behind them. So when you were using it as an ambulance, it looked more like an ambulance. It had all glass and had curtains. But then when you got ready to use it for a hearse, you put the bars back on and had a different look. You took the siren, came off the top of it. It had a wing nut, had a zipper in the headliner. So you just took the wing nut loose and you could unhook the light and then you'd have a hearse.
There's no way I could, I mean, I've been in the back of an ambulance, like, they're tall now.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine, like, actually being in the back of a
Yeah,
hearse.
yeah. So yeah, back then I'm thinking if you're living, right, so you got not only, you're getting picked up in what we call a hearse now, but you also got a funeral director picking you up. So it's got to be a little way different than like what we're used to now when you call 911, like, because people call 911 like, hey, there's Bob in a hearse looking thing. You know, it's got to be a weird vibe, you know, back then. But.
Well, it actually came up last night. I was in Swanee.
It's like, no, don't.
Yeah, I'm not.
I want to go to the
I called 911, not the venue room, you know.
I was up in Swanee last night doing a presentation at a church that they want to know more about prearranged funerals. And of course, anytime you put a funeral director in front of a crowd, you're going to get a lot of questions, and they're going to be, some of them are doozies always. You know, it's what have you always wanted to ask a funeral director? Now you got your chance. But I met a lady that is from Swanee, and she's 97 years old, and she's doing really, really well. And she was telling the story about my dad, you know, more or less saved her daughter's life and got her to Nashville. And she spent 20 weeks in Vanderbilt, and they found out really she had E. coli, but they didn't find that out till years later. They didn't know what she had then. They didn't really know about E. coli then. But anyway, I asked her if, you know, she survived, and she said, yeah, and she made a medical doctor, and she graduated from Vanderbilt.
Oh, wow.
So she said, tell your dad, we thank him all the time for our daughter still being here and being with us, and she's had a good, successful life. So that's a cool ambulance story. And they didn't have a lot of medical training, but they basically got people in the ambulance really quick and got them to the hospital.
Oh,
really
yeah,
quick.
yeah. I mean, that's what I was about to say. Like, I'd say at that point in time, it was more like, get them in, let's go. Like, let's let this V8 eat, you know.
Which my dad, it kind of just like, to him, that's still, they shouldn't have got away from getting them there that fast, because he said, you know, you see an ambulance pull up at a house now, it might be 30 minutes before they ever put them in it, because they do so much there.
And Sam can attest to this. Like, I think of Buck Tucker, like,
Load them and go.
He had his partner in the back doing his thing, and he's like, let's go, we gotta go.
He would have been a great funeral home ambulance guy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, he's hustling to the door.
Yeah.
Get them loaded. Get them back. If it's not absolutely critical at that second, we're peeling out of the driveway. Like, he's ready to go.
Right.
So,
Right.
you know, I mean, I guess this kind of leads into that. So I guess my next question was, you know, have you always worked for your business, or what did you do prior to doing now? And I really guess that it was pretty impressionable to you at a young age, you know.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that it was forced, but I mean, you just kind of felt
No,
natural.
and my dad always stressed to me from a real young age, he's like, you need to make your own decisions and, you know, be exposed to other things. And I never want you to feel like you're trapped and this is what you have to do. Because he said, I know so many people that were second or third generation funeral directors that felt pressure from the family and felt trapped. And he said, number one, they usually made horrible funeral directors if they don't love it and it's not their passion and it's not their calling, because it's not a 9 to 5 job that you just walk and get away from. You don't go home and just like get away from it. I mean, when you're a funeral director, you're pretty much one 24/7. I mean, you're always expected to present yourself and carry yourself as such, and you know, you don't take your coat and hat off and hang it up and say, you know, I'm just, you know, you're a funeral director. I mean, it's 24/7.
So did you go straight into that? Was there a period in between high school where you kind of, and then I'd love to know that about your dad as well. Did he go straight in?
Yeah, we'll kind of, we've skipped around a little bit on Dad's story, but yeah, being out here growing up and spending a lot of time in Winchester, he knew that he wanted to do it, but working in Nashville, he basically lived in the funeral home his junior and senior years of high school because the ambulances run all night. So he'd get off of school at 3:30 or 3 or whatever and go to the funeral home, and he'd stay there till the next morning when it was time to go to school. And You know, he had other jobs. I mean, he told me he worked for the state highway department for one summer, and they didn't have weed eaters back then. They had those sling blades, you know, and that's how they cut the medians and the places on the side of the road. So, yeah, he said that one summer that was enough of that kind of work.
Yeah,
So he ruled that out. That's not what he wanted to do.
Bless him. I mean, that thing's probably as big as he was, you know. I mean, he's not a very tall guy, you know. So.
I tell you what, buddy, I've seen some old school pictures on y'all's Facebook, like probably whenever your dad was probably your age, and like Bob was.
Oh, he was stout. He used to be able to do 100 one-handed push-ups.
That's what he said.
That photo I saw, like I said, I think it was like a celebration or something like that. I mean, I could tell, like, man, he's been moving some bodies for sure.
Those photos from the late '60s with the flat top hair and everything, he looked like he was pretty in good shape. You know? So I believe the push-up story is right.
Mm-hmm.
So
go ahead, Sam.
So the high school. So right after high school, does he transition right into school for being a funeral director?
Yeah, he did, and he also joined the Air National Guard, and after high school he went to San Antonio, Texas for basic training in the Air Force, and then he was stationed in Nashville at Tennessee Air National Guard. So he went to school right after he completed his Air Force training, basic training. So then he went to mortuary school in Nashville.
I was just about to ask, like, at that time, of course, as education evolves, you know, I was curious, like, what kind of training you would have to have had at that point. I know now, like, there's a whole college dedicated to it, but I didn't know if back then.
Oh, yeah, the funeral colleges that are still, some of them going on today, some of those colleges started in the late 1800s.
Oh, wow.
So formal training has been going on for a long time. My dad's story on education, the funeral service wise, he started at John A. Gupton College in Nashville, but he was still living in the Hibbett and Haley Funeral Home trying to run ambulance calls all night and go to school and work too. And he was passing and he made plenty, the grades were fine, but it got to be a little bit much. I think the first exam period weighed on him pretty heavy, trying to juggle, you know, working all night and then going to school and take exams the next morning. So he actually transferred from John A. Gupton in Nashville to Kentucky School of Mortuary Science, and then he just focused on school for the rest of the time. And he's glad he did. Focus on studying and no outside interference. He said that definitely helped.
Well, and one cool thing too about his schooling too, because like you said, it's a lot different now. The requirements that the state requires on hours and stuff, and through certain degrees in school. But he said he learned more about embalming from a guy that didn't have a license because he was grandfathered in. You know, he said, you know, he just one of those old guys. That learned it from being passed down. You know, there wasn't a textbook out. So I thought that was interesting, especially when I started going through the school, how different it is. Mm-hmm. You know, like, because I mean, it's pretty much just like a regular college class, what I kind of went through. But to get that side of it, you know, learning more just person to person, I think that's one thing schools kind of miss a little bit too is, you know, that this is something you need to be hands-on with. And it's hard to get that from a textbook, you know, and just a guy talking in a Zoom class. It's a personal business.
You may be the one to answer this question, and it's because you can say you're the most recent. What were the time requirements for your father, then you, and then versus yours? Did it get longer? Has it stayed the same?
I don't know about Bob's.
Yeah, you went to school longer than I did.
Okay.
So I graduated mortuary college in 1991, and the requirements are more stringent now than they were then. When I went to school, the way the Tennessee law is, you can be a licensed funeral director only, or you could be a licensed embalmer and funeral director. So I got both, and some states, though, require you to have both. Even if you don't want to do embalming, they just have one license. Tennessee has dual license.
So how long was yours?
I went for about 12 months.
12 months?
Yeah.
And you got both in 12 months?
I got both in 12 months.
Yeah,
now it would take 24 months to get both.
Yeah, I just got my funeral directors only, and that was 3 semesters. So it took longer to get one
That's
than
right.
it did to get
What would
both.
it have taken to get your additional?
Probably another year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And there would have been certain actual college classes more. I had to take 1 or 2 college classes for my film directors, but I would have had to take like chem, I think biochem, and another math class.
Microbiology. would be
Yeah,
the
microbiology.
So, this is going to get us a little bit off the history, but I've never really paid attention. Like, I understand, like, you say funeral director and then licensed embalmer, so you have to, what does each carry? I mean, I guess you would think the funeral director would be the all-encompassing, I would think.
Yeah, I can do everything but embalm a body.
So basically, the director is handling of the arrangements, and I'm sure there's a
Meeting
whole,
with the family.
a whole lot
Yeah.
of legal issues you get into with like
Yeah.
the release of the body and everything
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
So you went through in '91. When did you go through?
I graduated, let's see, it's 2025 at the end, no, it'd be at the first of 2024, the front end of 2024.
All right, so I'm gonna flip the script. I'm gonna ask you.
All right.
So you said, of course, your dad said that he never felt like that was pushed on him or anything like that. How did you feel? Now you're not the second generation; you're the third generation. Mm-hmm. You've got a well-established business, and like everybody, I mean, they have their own likes and wants to do. Did you feel like that was pushed on you, or did you feel kind of like your dad, like it was just a natural flow and transition into it?
It definitely wasn't pushed because I showed zero interest. Like if you could show negative interest, I would show negative interest. But I'm glad that they didn't force that upon me, and because I don't think I would have enjoyed it like I do now. I did my own thing. Went to MTSU for a little while, but I trained horses. I loved walking horses, and I still do. I still judge horse shows, and my wife shows competitively, and I'm still part of the industry. We still raise colts as well, but that's always kind of been a passion of mine. And I assistant coached at Webb in bell buckle basketball. Sports is another big passion of mine, and I kind of you kind of grow up, and this business to me was not what I thought it was. Like growing up, I never really asked questions to him because I didn't really have any interest of it. But I would have had more interest if I'd known what it really was. To me, like you're just kind of, and people think of death in different ways. Mm-hmm. Everybody's got their own. If you ask people the definition of death, you'd get 20 different answers from 20 different people because everybody thinks about it differently. This business to me is not just about death. I mean, that's a big part of it, but it's really a people business. And I love people and working, having my own training business. I dealt with a lot of people every day, and really, I know it's weird to say, but this is really similar to that. You're dealing with people all the time,
100%.
And you're dealing with them at their worst times, but at the end of the day, it's very rewarding. I mean, the first month I was on the job here, I was in Walmart on the way home getting groceries, and a lady that we had just picked up her mother came up to me. I mean, just walked right up to me. She didn't have to walk up to me and said, "I really appreciate you picking up my mom last week." And that really told me that I was doing the right thing in this business because it's a calling.
Those are the ones, like I can personally say I share a similar story. Growing up, I didn't want to be in the family business, right? Mm-hmm. I didn't want to. Mid-teens kind of starts to change around, and I decided to go into the family business. Mm-hmm. But those interactions right there are the rewards of choosing that profession, right? Like mm-hmm. Those are the times where you're out there and you're not in a professional setting. They see you and they're like, "Hey, thank you for." And that's one thing about you guys. The way you interact, I've seen from the inside and outside, the way you guys interact with the families. It's incredible. You guys always build strong relationships, and I applaud that.
Well, I was thinking when we were talking about setting up the interview earlier, Jim was like, "Well, let's go in here and do this," and you talked about like family, meeting with families and stuff like this, and I was going to add on to that, like when you're meeting with families, you're like you said, you're meeting with them at their potentially worst times, mm-hmm. and those memories are like, I'm not going to say burned into their back of their mind. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not, depending on how much is going on. But like when we came in here, I was like, no, this room. Well, I've been in here. This was the arrangement room. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, this
That's
is where
right,
you
yeah.
know. So, and I mean, I'm sure that you know we talked a lot about y'all and talked about the building, but you know, I think anybody in this county or this area, you know, your name's synonymous. Everybody can tell you, you know, where it's at. The chapels, you know, I know that things have changed through time. And I guess that kind of leads me into like my next question about how things have, you know, evolved and moved forward. You know, my question I've got would be, have there been any significant events through time that have affected your business? And I'm just going to throw out two that I can immediately think of. One's of recently, you know, you've acquired Watson North Funeral Home. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, you've got the Jennings Cortner Funeral Home.
We do.
right?
We do. Yep.
Tell me a little bit how those things.
We of course did Jennings several years ago, and I say we've owned Jennings since 93, 94. I think that's when
And
we first did.
when did
But we actually
the
started helping
location-
them earlier than that.
Yeah, and when did y'all purchase the other location that it's in
It
now?
was-
Because it used to be across the street, right?
Yeah. Oh, down in Lynchburg.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll tell the story of Lynchburg first. Nancy Jennings started the Jennings Funeral Home in Lynchburg in her old family house, the house she grew up in. And it's right on Main Street in Lynchburg, and it's a veterinarian clinic now. But Nancy was a licensed funeral director, but she never went to school to do embalming. So she got us to do her embalming almost right when she started. I mean, we were the first people to, you know, help her with the embalming. We did all of her embalming, and she was in business. I think she started around 1993 or 4, something like that. And she passed away in 1999 on Christmas Eve.
Oh, wow.
But so we've been involved helping her for probably over 10 years doing her embalming. And then when Miss Nancy passed away very suddenly, cooking dinner, her husband didn't have any interest in it, and he wasn't licensed. So, you know, he told us, I definitely need y'all to operate it for me, but he wanted some time to figure things out. He said, you know, I just don't know what's going to happen. But anyway, we stepped in and managed it. Christmas of, that would be, 99. And so from that point forward, we managed it. And then in 2003, we purchased it from him. He was ready to sell it at that point. And then about 4 or 5 years after we purchased it from him, we moved locations. We wanted to own our own building, and they didn't want to sell that building. So we purchased a building in Lynchburg at an auction that was the Arbor Baptist Church. It was Arbor Baptist Church, just catty-cornered across the street from where we were. So we wanted to own our own building and do some work to it and change it, and that's what we're doing, still operating it today. And then on the Watson North business, that was in 2022. About in the summer of 2022, Tommy North reached out to me, and he was having some health problems, and he wanted us to assist him a little bit because he really didn't have a lot of help as far as can go out and to make removals in the homes and hospitals, and he was getting physically unable to be able to do that. And he needed us to help, and you know, I thought that's really all we were going to do, and we were glad to help anybody. So we assisted him through that summer, and his health kind of got worse all summer, and into that early fall, he just told us that he thought he was going to have to kind of medically retire, and he wanted to see if we were interested in purchasing it, and that's how that came about. And then in November of 2022 is when we purchased it.
So, and I kind of input those things into you, but what are some other significant events that maybe through time that have affected the funeral business?
Those were ones that like affected us, like as our business, but I would say COVID would be the big one, you know, obviously, just horrible pandemic there, but also as far as like day-to-day operations in the prep room and and just how we leave calls going home. You know, like I would bring a change of clothes with me, where I would change my clothes at the funeral home before I went to my house, you know, because I didn't want to affect my family at home. So there was a lot of hoops. And some,
During the COVID time?
yeah.
The single largest event that affected us.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a lot more steps to like normal things we're back doing now and were before that during that time frame we had to go
And
through.
you know, I mean, we're talking only 5 years ago now, but I mean, when that happened, you know, you went from, I mean, funeral homes pretty much honestly, sometimes one of the most social big events that we have, and living in a small town, but you know, so you went from being able to do that to basically like hardly anybody.
Yeah, I mean, when it first came out, you know, the governor was pretty much trying to enforce 10 people could be in the funeral home other than the funeral home employees. And then they were debating that. They were saying if we had 3 people in there, maybe we could only have 7.
It's hard to tell if somebody's got 5 or 6 kids and you start doing the math. They're like, no, y'all gonna have to rotate. You know, kids.
How did, you know, when you're dealing with families, like I said during that time, how did you navigate that?
I think
we tried to use common sense.
that's the key. I mean, we decided to use common sense. I mean, that's what we thought would be the best way to handle it, and it really worked for the best. And we adapted. I mean, we came up with a system of the carport in the back. That's where we put the register books, and if we had more than one family having a visitation or a viewing, we had where people could pull underneath, and we brought the book over to their car if they didn't even want to get out of the car. And some of the people,
because most people didn't want to get out.
Some of the people didn't even want to sign their own name, so they're like, they didn't want to touch the pen and everything, you know. So they told us what the name was, and we signed the name for them. But I think one of the coolest things, and I can't take credit for coming up with it because one of my good friends in North Carolina came up with it, but we were one of the first to. I called her and said, "Hey, you got the best idea I've seen." And I said, "What would you think about if we were going to do the same thing in Winchester?" And she's like, "By all means," you know. She was glad that we was going to be used somewhere else. So she came up with this that was called Hugs from Home, and so where the chapel wouldn't look empty to a family that's sitting in there with 10 or 15 or 20 people or however many people they decided they wanted to have in there, with all the pews being empty, we did balloons. So we got a helium tank, we rented a helium tank, and we did red heart-shaped balloons. And the people would call in and tell us what their personal message was they wanted to say to the family. And we tied a little index card on the balloon string, and we placed the balloons on the pews. So like, instead of people sitting there, you look back and it was the whole place is full of balloons. And they had those messages on there. And watching those people walk around and read what their friends wanted to tell them, I mean, I think that's what helped us survive COVID and get through the process, because that made the people feel like, you know, even though people weren't there, they could express the way they felt about it being there. And I think that's the best thing that happened during COVID.
Yeah, because like you said, it helped the families, and that at the end of the day is our goal. You know, they didn't get that line of friends and family to tell them how much that person meant to them, or, you know, I'm thinking about you, but they at least got the message. You know, they may not have got it, you know, right like we're talking now, but they got the message that somebody cared about that person, you know. And I think
my friend got the idea from watching sports where they had the cutout of the people in the stands, and she's like, we need something like that in our chapel where the chapel doesn't look empty. So she's like, let's get a balloon and let's put their individual message of what they want to tell them on it, and that's how she came up with it.
So did that, of course, that, and I think, looking back, I mean, the Facebook Live of funeral services.
Yep.
I mean, I guess, you know, realistically, I would have at least thought it might have been a little tacky prior to the COVID area.
Yeah.
But I mean, the cool thing about it is, you know, like live videos, is they're available. So if someone's commenting messages on there, like, you know, oh, I loved your dad, you know, he was so good to me, you know, like I said, I'm sure that's probably something we never really took into consideration, but I mean, everything changed, of course. We all learned that we could do things remotely, But the Facebook Live thing, I think would be pretty cool.
Yeah, that's one thing I wish Facebook would use a little more common sense on, because when we first were doing that, of course, then we got hit by the music rights thing when we would play songs, and I was just, come on, guys.
We got all
you
the
know?
license for music, and we pay a fee,
Yeah.
so we can publicly use music.
Yeah.
But Facebook didn't realize that. So if you were playing "Go Rest High on the Mountain," Facebook just killed all the sound
Killed the sound totally?
Yeah, and they wouldn't turn it back
that
on.
went like for a couple of months till they finally somebody told
Well,
them.
and then we just
license.
started just recording them and just giving the copy to a family, and then we would post the link to our website.
Well, then,
After the
correct me if
fact.
I'm wrong, because I remember this. Then y'all got hit with like the spam fake link. So
Well,
join the live
that's still
broadcast.
going. Yeah, that's
and I
still
tell you
going.
what, it's a shame, but that's still going on. And what happens is the people with the ill intent are seeing our postings as far as the obituaries on social media and our website, and then they're putting something on for people to click a link on, and it makes it look like it's legit from us, where it says, "Do you want to watch this service?" But immediately it charges them something to do that, and it's a terrible nationwide problem. It's not just in Tennessee or this area; it's going on all over the country.
So, I mean, we kind of this is going really well. I mean, everything's leaked in. So, how different, Jim, is it now from whenever you first started doing this job, or even for your dad? I know prior to like us talking, you brought up like the hearses and then the horse-drawn hearses. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, on the horse-drawn hearses, I think it's just so unique. I mean, Franklin County is a large county, and it's got several communities, and they're widespread. I mean, as far as when you're in horse and buggy days, it's a long way from Huntland to Sherwood, unless you go over the mountain with your horse, and it might shorten it a little bit. But anyway, Mr. Moore was innovative, and he had at least 6 horse-drawn hearses, and he made arrangements, say, like he kept one in Huntland. He would have an arrangement with a farmer that had horses, and he would leave a hearse there. He had one up in Pelham. He had one in Sherwood. He kept one in the Oak Grove area. So he spread those out where they would be geographically located closer to where the death occurs. And at that time, your visitations didn't take place in a funeral home. People had the visitations in their homes.
I've heard about that, and I was about to ask earlier. I can remember my dad telling me, when his father died, he's like, we had the visitation at the house. I was about to ask, like, whenever you were a funeral director at that time, you had to facilitate that event, not in your home, where you were holding it.
I got in on some of that, and I mean, even like in history, a funeral director had the first patent on a folding chair. So it was because they needed portable chairs to take to houses. So they say that a funeral director had one of the very first patented ideas for a pickup truck to haul equipment out to the home to do a home embalming or to do a home funeral. And my dad, when he first came here, there was a family up at Pelham that were real close friends of the Moore family here. And Mr. Moore, of course, had embalmed all of their family members in their home in one certain bedroom in the same house. And they wanted to keep that going even after we started doing it in the funeral homes. And they asked my dad when he came here and started working and ended up buying the funeral home, when we have our next death of our grandmother, we want to see if you'll honor our request for you to come up and do it the way that's always been done. So that's the only one, to my knowledge, that my dad ever embalmed in a home, but he did. And we've got a lot of the old equipment, and it looks like kind of like the old doctor's bags where they made the house calls. That's kind of what they carried the embalming equipment to the house in. But they even had portable folding embalming tables, little small tables that you could take out to do that. So that's a big change in my dad's lifetime. And
then once it transitioned back to the funeral home, because like at the home they liked it where everybody would stay with the body, but then once it transferred to the funeral home, didn't families stay at the funeral home?
Yeah, I mean, even when I started helping my dad in the 80s, we had still a lot of people at that time. If we went out to the local Franklin County Hospital, the county owned the hospital then, they would follow us at 3 o'clock in the morning from the hospital
Oh, wow.
to the funeral home. And they would come inside. And while we had someone preparing the body right then, they wanted to go ahead and make their arrangements. So, I mean, like, a lot of times it wasn't odd for somebody to be making arrangements at 3 o'clock in the morning. And somebody would stay here for a 3 to 4 day process because most all of the visitations were 2 nights.
Well, and that's a thing.
And they stayed all night.
I've told people that, and I'm like, now we're like, one night visitation, the next day's a funeral. And I was like, man, I can remember the days of, like you said, I can remember a lot of times of
Yeah.
2 night visitation.
And it came from the custom of, they were called wakes because people actually sat with them all night to see if they were going to wake up.
Oh, wow.
So that's why the term wake came into being.
I didn't know that, and then those were generally held in homes.
Yeah,
and
yeah. So like Robert says, when it transferred to the funeral homes were large enough you could have crowds and people were coming in here, they stayed all night. So, I mean, it used to be like 2 nights, somebody would be here all night long, staying with the person, and then they'd go to the cemetery. So it was, my dad was always like, he was amazed, I mean, how hard that is on the family. And I mean, lack of sleep, you can't sleep very good in a chair or a couch or a pew or here at the funeral home, but it's like, it amazed him. That was like a 3 to 4 day process. And that was difficult.
what's the time frame when that kind of stopped? Because that's interesting to.
Probably it stopped by 1990. There was hardly anybody staying all night. And I'm trying to think of what was the last time I know
Didn't we
somebody
have
stayed all night.
didn't we have one at Watson last year?
We had one, yeah.
They may not have stayed all night, but now
They
they
did
stayed
stay.
till like
Yeah.
3 or 4 o'clock in the morning.
Well, what
I mean,
our thing was, and we would still let somebody do it today. I mean, if somebody came in and say, hey, it's always been our custom, or even if they said that's what we want to do, we would say, 2 or 3 people that want to do that, we're going to show y'all how to get out if there's an emergency, and we would just lock the doors and let them stay. I mean, we wouldn't turn anybody down today. I mean, that's one thing I think that I learned from my dad is try to make what the family wants work. Don't tell people you can't do something. I mean, try to make it work. Try to figure it out, because if it's important to them, you need to do it.
So hold on. We have to. So you said something there. I know you guys are so accommodating, right? That's what everybody says in the community. But what is the most interesting request that somebody has had?
Man, there's been so many, and there's so many different ones. It depends on what angle you go. If you wanted to go as far as like something being very strange or odd or different. I think the strangest one that I ever had was a family we were serving, and they had a visitation here in Winchester, and then the funeral was going to take place over in Jasper. And so it kind of put me on the spot a little bit, because I was over at a colleague's place where I was going to have to meet this request, and it was very unusual. But the man, of course, was in a suit, and he slept on satin sheets. He loved satin sheets. So we actually had a satin sheet underneath him with his suit on.
Mm-hmm.
But his wife wanted the suit taken off. She said, he doesn't sleep in a suit. So after everybody went around at the end, after the pallbearers went in, we got everybody to step outside except for me and my friend that we were using his funeral home. And the wife did stay in there with us. And she fixed him exactly like she wanted everything to be. And we covered him up in the red satin sheet, and that's the way he was buried. But that's probably one of the most unusual.
Right. Do you have any that you've heard from your father?
Trying to think. That definitely one I mentioned would be the most unusual. But I mean, you have a lot of things that really aren't unusual, but that people ask about, and it's important to them. I think a big one that people still do it even today is like, if it's possible on the way to the cemetery, if it's even remotely close to where their house is, they'll want us to drive by their house. Mm-hmm. And I think I can see that. I mean, go by there, and we kind of pause, stop in front of their house. I think that's kind of neat.
That would kind of, the last ride by the house kind of thing.
Yeah. And then I think some of the ones that are cool is like for your occupation. Like, you know, we've had people that owned a wrecker service or drove a wrecker and they wanted to put the casket on the back of a rollback. I mean, I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I
And
think that's
things like that, or farmers on the back of a tractor somewhere, or a tractor pulling a wagon, or people that like horses. We got the horse-drawn hearses still, and we can do that request, or we can do it with a wagon and their own horses. I mean, we've had people that want to be pulled.
We use the county, and I don't know what year. I'm not a car person.
Yeah, Winchester.
Yeah, the
fire truck.
Winchester fire truck, the old one, you know, that's in the glass case.
Probably the first motorized one they had.
Yeah, we used it on one
Several
a
times.
couple years ago.
Yeah.
I remember it, and I thought that one was really neat.
So, what is one of the best pieces of advice you've ever been given?
I think one that comes to mind for me is my dad. I think maybe got it from a relative or aunt or something, and she told him start out like you can hold out, and I think that means is just don't start things that you can't keep up with. You know, don't overload yourself. You know, don't promise out something that you can't continue or can't continue to keep doing. I think that's been good advice for me.
Robert?
I think it's not really something Bob's told me. It's just something I've learned by watching him, and it's just be there. You know, it's at the end of the day, these families, when they're going through, just being there and showing that you care. People can tell if you're faking it or not.
Yes.
And at that time, obviously they need our business and knowledge of this business to help them through the situation, but they also need a friend.
Oh, 100%.
And I think just like you say, your presence means more than the words.
Yeah,
I mean, if you can't it's hard to come up with the right
Yeah,
words.
there's
I
nothing
mean,
we can say.
And you see people struggle with that. I mean, maybe y'all kind of struggle with it when you come in to see somebody. I mean, sometimes the proper words, you just don't know what to say, but just being there and giving them a hug or showing them that you're supporting them, I mean, you don't have to say a lot. You just got to be there.
And that's one thing. Everybody that's in this building that's working for this business, and I've been here a bunch of times through the years. That's one thing. Everybody's genuine, and that really shows through.
Yeah.
That's an incredible thing. Just for those people who are in that time of need, just being genuine and there to serve is incredible. And you guys do a great job at it.
And I think that's one thing with the profession that helps us as far as the hiring. You know, people that want to work here. It's if you don't care, you won't last long because you'll get burnt out pretty quick.
Well, I mean, through it.
Yeah. I mean, and just
Right.
just like the hours, like he said, this isn't a normal 9 to 5. If you don't care, you won't last long because you're not going to do it. You know, so it's like
kind of a feast or famine kind of thing. It seems like it's like you may have a service today and you may not have a for a day or two, and not that there's not still work to be done, but I think that the schedule would probably be pretty.
It's so much different than it used to be too, because like people between my age and Robert's age, we've got a lot of people in that category here. I mean, they think sometimes things are just really hard or the hours are long, and there's no way they'd made it working for my dad back when I started working for him, because the way he was trained is if there was somebody there, there's business going on, you just plan on being there. Don't think about even going to be asking off, you know, if we've got somebody or we're busy. And I mean, when we were here, the funeral directors, we were expected to, of course, work all day and do the funerals, but if we had visitations that night, we might get to go home and eat supper if we were lucky, but we had to come back, and then we had to stay till 9 or 10 at night because people didn't have 3 to 8 or 5 to 8. They had the visitations from whenever you could have them ready in the morning. Like I say, they used to stay all night, but I mean, when they quit staying all night, they started staying till 10. And we thought like going home at 10 was early because we were used to all night. So, I mean, the burnout of funeral directors, and I think about how many good people that were lost in this profession just because they didn't use a little bit more common sense on overworking people or overworking the hours, because it didn't have to be that way. I mean, there could have been a little better attempt at scheduling, juggling things around. It's like now, we have a lot of people come in to work the visitations, so the funeral directors can go home at 5 or 6 if there's not a service that night. And I think the key to keeping our people happy and keeping a good work environment is you got to let them have a chance to be with their family. I mean, they got children, you got to let them go to the soccer games, you got to let them do the activities. I mean, you can't expect them to be married to the profession. And that's the biggest thing I've seen change for the positive since I've been in it, because when I started and graduated mortuary college in 91, there were 120 people that graduated that day with me, and over half of them were not in it in 2 years.
Dang.
I mean, that's a big, quick drop off. And they burned them out. And there were some really good people in my class.
Wow.
And that hurt. And,
But it's a second marriage, essentially. I mean,
yeah, it's kind of like, I know both of y'all work in law enforcement, but pretty much I'm sure, of course, I think if you get into it, being an investigator, you may be on call and you don't have exactly set hours. But most of the time, if you're an officer on patrol, you probably have a time frame where you have to work, and then you're going to know when you can be off. But y'all know from that, I mean, you got to let people have their home and their family, or you're not going to keep them working down there. I mean, you got to have them happy for a good work relationship.
That's essential. Just the stress of being, on for a week, off for a week, that's added stress, right? You're like, okay, I've got to.
Yeah.
What I know my kids got to do this and that, but what if I get called out? And and I know Ryan knows that I've experienced it.
and grown up in, I mean.
Yeah. I mean, that's just what we saw.
And your dad probably had to miss some of your events, and my dad missed a lot of my
I was about
events.
to ask Robert, like, how did that work, like, with you in that generation of the mindset, like, growing up,
I missed a lot of
yeah, I was
Roberts.
about to say,
Yeah.
I tried
Missed a
not
lot.
to, but I mean, I missed a lot of them. And, I think being in a supervision role now with employees that have young children, I'm using kind of my past, and I hate that I ever missed any of Roberts, and I regret a lot of that now. But I think that's made me be more mindful with my employees now with small children. It's like I told them, if you need to be somewhere with your child and you can't get anybody to cover for you, my child's grown. Ask me. I'll be glad to stay here and work for you. I don't ever want them to miss out something if it can be helped. And I think that gives us a good family of employee atmosphere, and we want them to feel like we're a family here and we got each other's back and we help each other,
So that kind of leads into my next question as well. I mean, scheduling is definitely a tough challenge, but what's one of the toughest challenges that y'all have faced?
Technology, maybe, in a way, because
it kind of is.
We're constantly adapting to things you see, like at the National Film Director Association shows. Like, obviously, you got to know how to incorporate it, but also know your area as well. Like, we're not going to use as much technology as like a funeral home in New York City per se, where they're just used to everything, on their phone and all that. I mean, there's even register books now where it's all electronic.
Robert and I kind of determined that
and
Franklin County is just not ready for like an all digital register book.
No.
Yeah.
They wouldn't like that, and I don't
want
blame
that coin. Like we talked about earlier, y'all were on the cutting edge because, like your dad said, y'all were the first place to have.
Yeah,
facts.
well, and one thing I thought that was getting like too much in the register book thing probably, but one thing I thought was really cool about the register book though is it's a system. So like in Cortner would have their own system. So like if once say you came to sign the register book, once you get in our system, you're always in our system. So like you wouldn't have to like type out everything in, like you just boom. After you type in the first 2 letters of your name, you'd pop up. So like, and the family has access to like your phone number, all that, like say, because how many people do you have come? Yeah, you don't have to, but like how often do you see like at events or something like, hey, I saw so-and-so, I hadn't seen him in a long time, man, I'd love to get his number and give him another call.
And
so it is beneficial in a way.
It's like your address, because they want to send you a thank you note if you
We get that one a
or
lot.
something. So
we get address a lot.
it's harder to find the addresses now than it used to be. Like the phone book was the golden thing. Now we don't even have one in the building, probably.
Right.
But and also technology through like the way we present material to families. You know, as you can see, like in here, we have a TV. We try to put TVs in all the selection rooms because there's so much merchandise out there now. Like
so much personalization.
Yeah, and you can't show everybody everything in that little room. You know, in there. You know that they might want to this. You know, you specialize so many things. Even just the cards. I mean, you're talking about the cards.
We were talking about them earlier, and like.
You used to give fans
I remember
out,
when there weren't any memorial cards. That's what you see out by the register book. You know, now they have somebody's picture on them, or sometimes they have multiple pictures and they're personalized.
Yeah.
But used to, we had one kind. It was black and white, and it was an image pre-printed of some praying hands, and they had the 23rd Psalm pre-printed in them, and you just put on a copy machine. We didn't have computers. I mean, you had the name of the deceased, when they were born, when they died, just the service information, and you had that literally off a copy machine. You preloaded those pre-printed memorial folders that you just laid the information face down on the copy machine. You could even see the lines on there. I mean, it wasn't even really a good copy, but that's what memorial folders started out as. And I remember the first pictures really being displayed at a funeral home. You know, people just brought in framed pictures and we put them on a table. That was kind of your first personalization. And then somebody at a trade show got fancy and made a magnetic framed board, and it had little magnetic things to go around your regular pictures, like you took 35 millimeter pictures.
Yeah.
And you made a picture collage, and you were on the cutting
still got one in the back.
of technology at a funeral home when you had that. I mean, if you had a magnetic board, I mean, that was like, wow.
Everything was like mind blowing. It's like, we have PowerPoint and we can put photos on that?
Yeah.
It's gone like so much more choices for the families now, and the quality of the printing is better. We've got a lady that her only job here is personalization. Brenda Taylor, her whole job all day long is printing books, register books. We print them in the house. She makes the memorial folders, service folders. We basically just have a full-time print shop, and that's her whole job.
Yeah.
And I mean,
and that does the videos that you see playing at you know through the visitation. She does all that. So has to go through all those pictures.
it really
it's
makes
a
me feel
full-time
old
job.
when I think about the first funeral videos, because people brought the pictures in to me. I scanned them on a flatbed scanner, and we sent them to a company, and it took forever to send them because we didn't have high speed. It was dial-up internet, so you can imagine trying to send. We were just trying to send 20 photographs. There's no way we could have sent more than that because they never got there. But they made a video somewhere in a studio out of state, got it back to us finally electronically. We put them on VHS tapes for people to take home. So that shows you how long funeral videos. Now, you know, everybody thought about, we switched to DVDs. DVDs are obsolete now for most people. We put them on thumb drives.
Right.
So you put them in your smart TV or, you know, whatever. Now, so now even like you're old school if you're using DVDs.
I'm still a disc fan, but I mean, thumb drives. I mean,
Yeah.
what we're recording this on, that's this little bitty, you know, card is like 256 gigs, and that's
Yeah.
like
A lot.
100, almost a, you know, went on.
Don't
Probably
tell me how
200.
many discs
Yeah.
you would
Yeah.
make.
Yeah.
So before we leave this subject, though, before we started recording, tell everybody about the fax machine and
Yeah, I think that's a pretty cool story to kind of date me. We had the first fax machine that was in Franklin County. So the courthouse didn't have one yet. The health department didn't have one yet. The radio stations didn't, because we got faxes in for both radio stations, and they'd come pick up their news. But the sheriff's department, you know, Tim Fuller has been up here to fax stuff before. And they got one. They were probably the third or the fourth people. I think they may even had one before the courthouse did, maybe. And I know Tommy Yarber at WCDT, he got one on real early on. And a lot of people went out to WCDT and used his fax machines. But that old school fax, it wasn't on a piece of paper like a flat copy paper. It was on a roll. So if you got like this long 20-page thing, as soon as it spit out, that thing would just roll up. Well, you faxed it on a flat piece of paper, but when you received it,
So was it almost like
It was
old
on
school,
like it was
the tear off on the
yeah,
side?
it was like a
paper with
Well,
the
it didn't
holes
have
up
the
the side.
side. It didn't have the side tear off, but the paper came on a roll. So your fax paper that you loaded in the fax machine came out, and when you let go of it, it rolled back up. So it's real frustrating because, I remember stretching one all the way out across the desk and trying to keep it laying down flat because when you're reading multiple pages. So, see, that like, y'all don't even know about that.
So
Y'all don't remember
what
that.
was so what was the reason for the need or the necessity for the fax machine? Like them on like fax your obituaries to like
To the Tennessee and in Nashville.
banner?
Yeah, because back then, everybody got home delivery for the Tennessean. Most people that were in the news got the Tennessean in the morning, Nashville Banner in the afternoon. And they didn't have Facebook to go look it up. So, the radio stations then, though, were paramount. They were the Facebook before Facebook because my dad would wake up, his first phone call, because we answered the phones at home. We didn't have any answering service or anything. And my dad, he said, we will never use an answering service. We will always answer the phone.
Well,
and that was a big step.
That's a great piece of advice right there.
Yes.
Because that's more aggravating than cold calling somebody. It's like, press 5.
Yeah,
Yes.
oh, it is.
Yeah.
It is. And we don't have that here. But the answering service we have are trained people that just answer for funeral homes, thank goodness. And they, hopefully you can't tell too much difference. But
wasn't there at some point in time in the funeral business where you could call a funeral home and hear the obituary?
yeah, we had the obituary line. But getting back.
The reason I laughed is because it's still hanging in the office. The machine that Martha,
But it quit working.
yeah, Martha Johnson, who worked here for years, she did that for years every day. Read that thing and updated it. Well, it quit working,
Yeah.
and we've tried like nationwide to find somebody to fix it.
Well, the last one that we bought was
it's so obsolete that nobody could fix it.
using. So I bought one on eBay. But anyway, getting back a little bit.
So if you're hearing that, everybody, they need some help finding one of these.
Yeah.
But no, people have finally quit calling and asking when you're going to get it fixed.
Yeah.
So the people had
How long
to
ago
be
did it
fairly.
go down?
Oh, it's in
About 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah, about 3 or 4 years. But people were still calling up until about a year ago. But at any rate.
Yeah, like, you get that
Get
fixed
back.
yet? Yeah.
With the radio stations, though, so the first time that WCDT and WZYX would give them was around 6 a.m. So my dad answered the phone every night if he was in town. So he got a call at about 5:30 to 5:45, and hopefully both of them didn't call at the same time because I don't even know if we had call waiting. They probably got a busy signal, but anyway, he would talk to Jeff Pennington, and my dad would read them over the phone. But it was a big improvement when we started faxing the information to the radio station.
So they would call your dad.
So he'd have to read every
wow.
grandchild, all of that, and it was a long process. If we had 3 or 4 new ones, and he had to give them to us at 6 in the morning.
I'm terrible about like pre-recorded, saying things that you're going to say, and I couldn't imagine thinking that half of Franklin County is going to hear what I'm saying, through this phone call.
Well, the obituaries in the newspaper were dictated. Miss Winnie Bradford was the secretary before Martha Johnson was here. Miss Winnie Bradford was here before my dad. She was actually here before him and stayed. She stayed till I graduated high school, so she was here a long time. But she had to read the obituaries it was a Miss Drury. I think her name was Faye Drury, I believe, at the newspaper. But she had to read the obituary. My dad said what's amazing to him, there were fewer mistakes made when they were being read than they were when they started faxing them. And then now we send them by email. But he said there was more mistakes made now than when we were just reading them.
Well, you think about it. To be fair, if the funeral home's dealing with people, if someone's name is pronounced, different than the way it reads, and the funeral home's been dealing with the family, they know this person because they've seen them. So I imagine that would be pretty challenging. The mood's lightened up a lot. What is one of your favorite memories or the neatest moments that y'all have experienced?
I'll let you go
It's
first.
been so many of them. That's going to be tough just trying to.
Well, let me narrow it down. Here's a thought because this just came to mind earlier. Who is who has graced the doors of this funeral home that you're like, oh wow, like, I mean, we all think of, I'm not going to say personally like celebrities, but big people. I've been here, I remember when Chief Young died, like it really blew my mind. Like, may not mean a lot to some, but I thought it was a lot. Like the chief of police of Nashville. You see these people on the TV every day, and
some of the more like ones that have been here several times. Lee Greenwood has been a pallbearer here like several times.
Really?
I mean, I'm kind of starstruck from him just because I'm real patriotic and I just love him singing the song that he does and the flag waving in the background. But he's a really nice guy, and he married Kim is his wife's name, but her grandmother lived here in Franklin County.
Oh, wow.
So they came back for a lot of funerals. In fact, they were just down here. They were down here less than a year ago for a funeral. Actually, we didn't have that service. They brought it down from Mount Juliet at Bond Funeral Home. But yeah, Lee Greenwood's been here. He sang here before live too, so that's
Really?
really cool. But we've had some top singers too.
This was before my time, but wasn't there a commissioner of the Southeastern Conference?
Oh yeah, well he lived across the street from where we're sitting. There was an old house over here, and y'all should remember this house. There was a house on the corner over here, and the unique feature about that house to me, on the second story, it had a porch, and the porch was screened in. You remember the White House that was sitting over
standing.
here? Yeah, but it was standing up through the 2000s. I mean, it hadn't been gone that long.
You're not talking about the house that was in the middle of the field here, is it?
The one that was just right across the street.
Oh yeah,
right here.
it was literally, yeah.
Okay. It kind of, it got in bad shape. The roof started leaking and eventually had to be torn down. But Bernie Moore, that was not that I know of related to the Moore Funeral Home Moores, but he lived there and he was the commissioner of the SEC, the Southeastern Conference. And he was also the head football coach of LSU for many years. And he's a Winchester native. And so that's pretty cool. He's buried at Franklin Memorial Gardens. But Bear Bryant has been to funerals here and I know over at Watson Funeral Home at their old location. Johnny Majors, of course, the Majors family. All of the Majors have been here. Johnny Majors spoke at funerals here. Philip Fulmer, his family's funerals have been here, and he's been a pallbearer here many times. I'll tell you one that you wouldn't think about, and this was before my time. The lead singer for Chicago, Peter Cetera. His mother's funeral was here, and my dad had the service. So this was probably early 80s, I'm gonna say, because it would be just prior to me. From everything from about 1985 on, I was here working and knew a lot about it. I was still in high school, but anyway.
A little blurry back then.
Yeah, so Peter Cetera comes in here with a blue jean jacket on, kind of distressed blue jean jacket, and maybe boots or something, but anyway. My dad wasn't familiar with the name anyway. He wasn't familiar, he didn't know about Peter Cetera because he hadn't said what his name was. His mother had a different last name, so I don't remember what her name was, but anyway, it's not important. But anyway, so he shows up to make the arrangements, and he came in from Los Angeles, and my dad wasn't familiar with his mom, and he wasn't familiar with him because he didn't know his name yet, but he's been introduced to him, and he was like, well, what do you do for a living? And I guess my dad might not have been a real big Chicago fan, or he didn't know the Peter Cetera just didn't ring a bell, and he's like, well, I make music. And he's like, you do? He said, yeah. He said, well, are you in a band? And he's like, yeah, I'm in a band. He said, oh, really? He said, well, what's the name of it? He said, Chicago. My dad said, I've heard of that one. So that kind of was an aha moment. But anyway, yeah, famous people. I'm trying to think about it more.
Mr. Buck Dotson won a World Series with the Los Angeles. This one were they in LA then?
It was not. It was Sammy Dotson.
Sammy Dotson.
It was related. It might have been Buck's brother. But Sammy Dotson.
That's right.
He was a scout for the Dodgers.
Yeah.
And when I was in high school, I remember seeing him sit in the stands. I mean, he was watching people that Franklin County was playing. He was scouting some of the Franklin County players too. But he'd always have on a Dodgers hat, and he had a radar gun. And I mean, he'd be sitting behind home plate. But he went all over the Southeast. But when we had his funeral, the Dodgers sent a huge Dodger arrangement, but they had all his World Series rings. So as long as he was with the organization,
He got a ring.
he got a
Got
ring.
a ring.
So
I
I
thought that
mean,
was
that's
really
the only
cool.
real like World Series rings I've seen and held were his. But he used to show them to us when we were in school. Or down at Little League, he'd come down when I was playing Little League and sit down there and he'd let us see one of those rings, and we thought that was really cool.
That is
But,
cool.
yeah, I mean, he's notable.
But
But
I'd say like any profession, like we talked about some of the tough things and stuff like that, and it's not all rainbows and roses. But at the end of the day, I mean, the cool experiences. I mean, that's
yeah.
I mean, like you said, your dad. Like, oh yeah, the lead singer for Chicago is in here. Like, seemed like a nice guy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
That would have been back when they were just.
that's when they were
huge.
hammered.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And for me especially, as big of a University of Tennessee athletics fan as I am, it's really cool to have the Major family and the Fulmer family kind of right here, and really blessed that they entrust us with a lot of their
Yeah.
decisions on business. when-
John
when-
Ward's been on funerals.
Yeah.
That's pretty
And,
cool. To me, that was a hero.
The when my dad and I met, the funeral home that assisted the Majors family in Johnny's funeral when they came to the gravesite at Lynchburg Cemetery, and getting there to be a part of that, probably one of my coolest moments. Just that was. I hate it was towards the end of COVID.
Yeah.
There had been so much more there if it wouldn't have had to been. But that was like Big Orange royalty that day. I mean, so many former players.
Oh yeah, it was. And then it's like
And that they made the drive all the way from Knoxville.
How different do you think Franklin County is now compared to whenever? I guess you can only attest to your lifetime, but how different does it seem to you compared to whenever would you say 60, 70, 71?
1971's when I was born.
How different does it feel like this
Oh.
place is compared to then?
It's really not even like the same place. I mean, it's changed a lot. I mean, the size it's 4 times what it was when I was born. I mean, it's hard to describe. I mean, all the changes, but there's so many things we have here now that I never thought we would have. I mean, a big one to me is the 4-lane to the interstate. I mean, that 4-lane road. I never think we'd have that. Nissan, never did think we'd have that. It's sitting out on a great big farm out there that the Powers had their farm on. So many businesses and industry now here that we didn't have anything when I was growing up much other than farming, and we had E&B Carpet Mill before it was Shaw Carpets, and we maybe had American Standard, had a factory, a plant in Huntland. I'm just trying to think about the early industry, but I mean, you could count industry when I was growing up, 3 or 4 companies maybe, and now look what we've got. And I mean, the lake, I don't remember before the lake, but
I think the
that
lake was
changed.
the late 60s?
Yeah. So the lake was brand new when I came into the world. But yeah, I hear people talking about how nice the river was. I wish I would have known, and saw what it looked like before Tim's Ford Lake.
Oh, yeah.
And the farms that are under the lake and how pretty they were, and you fished on the river, and just those things I never did experience. I've heard about it, but yeah, I mean, there's just tons of changes. I remember the hat factory. Of course, they still make hats at Winchester Hat Corp, which I think is really cool because the process that they do down there, I don't know that there's 1 or 2 other places in the United States besides Winchester that can do that.
Have you been in there and seen how they make it?
Yeah.
Like it's legit, hand,
Yeah.
and the things, because I didn't realize this, they make all the campaign hats, they make a lot of campaign hats, like that you see troopers wearing, law enforcement officers
Yeah.
wearing, the hats that we,
And a lot of the bands that are sewn into the hats.
and what blew my mind was to go in there and see those machines, And then he's like, well, he had a big pile of them. He's like, well, these are ones that we just pull parts off because they don't make them anymore.
Yeah.
And then he showed me like the fur, like they make the hat bodies for like a lot of your nicer hats.
Stetsons.
Is it Stetsons?
They do come in there, yeah. There's several. What's
The
another big
beaver.
hat?
He was showing me
Yeah.
the beaver fur. He's
Yeah.
like, this stuff right here is like fabric gold about how
Well,
much
like
it
you
costs.
got a 1X all the way to a 15 or 20X, I think is what they go, but it's like that's the percent of beaver that's in there. So the higher, the most expensive hat I think is a 20X Western hat. I think I've got one that's a 10 that's like half as good as the best. But I bought a hat in Jackson Hole, Wyoming at a custom hat maker, and in the process of her shaping it, and she found out where I was from. She was filling out I was giving her my information. She said, this hat came from Winchester. So she's like, you know Richard Bean? I was like, yeah. Well, he comes out here once a year. That's where we buy all our hats. That's where we buy all our blanks. So I thought that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. They make a ton of high-end custom hat companies.
And then
hats.
like where the cabinet shop is down there, that was a store. It was a factory store. So now they don't produce finished hats. When the hat leaves here, it has to be shaped and finished. But when it was Winchester Hat Corporation, my granddaddy and me would go in there, and there were rows and rows of finished hats, and people came from all over the southeast to buy hats in Winchester, Tennessee. And like older men today that you still talk to that wore hats, some of them still do. They're like, oh yeah, Winchester's known for hats. So that's something that people don't know.
Well, and it's comical because you always hear people say, meet me at the old hat factory. Well, it is old, but it's like still
going.
It still works.
But that was cool. They had a factory store.
Right. I want to ask you, you've talked about the change here, but we were talking a little bit before about the history of this building.
Yep.
And can you talk a little bit about that and how this building has changed with the business through the years?
This building has been a funeral home business in it since 1931. And this was at least the third location of the Moore Funeral Home. So they started in downtown Huntley. So down right in that area where Red Buck Hunters is now, there was an old line of buildings that I'm sure probably were lost to fire. But it I've got old photographs of it, and it looks kind of like, almost like a western town front, where it probably had, I think they didn't have concrete sidewalks, I think it had a wood sidewalk you walk down, but that's where the first location for Moore Funeral Home was in Huntley. And then after they left there was a house across from where the Winchester City Hall is, where Michelle Benjamin used to have her office, and I think it's empty right now, but there was a house that was there, and of course it had been torn down. I think that was later maybe a service station after that house was gone. That was their first Winchester location. And then for a short period of time, across from where the old fire engine used to be there, next to where Jerry Hood used to be, you can tell on that corner there's a building missing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when there was a building there, I know people talk about it was an H.G. Hill's grocery store there at one time. But before that, it was a funeral home. So he had that building at one time. And then he came and got this building in 1931. But this building was built in the 1840s, and it was built by the Estill family. Wallace Estill was kind of the matriarch of that family, and he built houses for all of his children. His actual house was located where the Templeton Gardens is, across from where Don Hall Ford used to be on the Cowan Highway, the Templeton Gardens that you can walk around. So there's an old cemetery. I don't know if y'all have ever noticed that, but there's an old cemetery behind that gardens, and that's where the Estill family is buried. But his plantation home was located there at that property. But he built this house, and then he built where the Antebellum Inn business was on the Lynchburg Highway, Twin Creeks area now. They built that house. They built the house where the Bean and Roten accounting is located today, down from the post office. That was another Estill house. And then on Sharp Springs, a big pretty white house on the right before you get to Watson Funeral Home, where Dr. Fight lived for a long time. That's one of the Estill houses.
On the corner of Chamberway.
Yes, Chamberway corner, that's right.
Yeah.
And if you really look at all those homes, you can tell a lot of similarities.
so
Yeah, now that
Yeah.
you say that, I mean,
Yeah.
it makes
Every
Yeah.
one of
But
us.
that family also gave 5,000 acres in Swanee to become the University of the South. So in the stained glass, the history of the university in front of All Saints Chapel, that Mr. Wallace Estill is one of those men on a horse with a surveyor getting ready to donate the land to become the University of the South. So he was a Revolutionary War general, and he received all this land down here as payment for fighting in the war. And they had thousands of acres here. And Estill Springs is where that comes from.
Really?
So yeah.
did not know
But
that.
anyway, yeah, they were, had to be at that time in the 1840s, one of the top 10 wealthiest families in Tennessee, I'm certain. Because you can see the houses they left, and you can tell it took a lot of resources to build them.
You donate 5,000 acres, I'd say you're doing all right.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, that was probably like a 5 acre tract.
well, so, when Ryan asked me about this project, like, I was excited because we want to talk about interesting businesses and interesting people and all that. But these little nuggets that you pull out from, we started this conversation on one track, and now we're learning about history in this area. And that's why I was so excited when he asked me to do this, because we're going to learn something we're learning the same time they're learning, which is really neat.
I'm remembering about like the square when I used to get off at not Clark Memorial, when I used to get off the bus at Mary Sharp when I was going to South. I got off at Mary Sharp. It used to be an elementary school where the Board of Education is. And I'd walk from there. I'd usually go over to the Fincham's Bakery and get me some donuts or donut holes or something over there. Do you remember that?
I don't remember it, but I've heard many people talking about the Fitchman's Bakery.
And it's located right there on the side of the vacant building there on the square that used to be the National Stores, and there's nothing there right now down from the theater coming back this direction on that end of that first block. And you go down to where Swafford, Peters, and Priest have their office down there. So the Fincham Bakery was before you got to where the law office is on the right there. And I'd go in there, and then I might go over to Prince Drug Store, and it would be there on the corner where the coffee shop is, the
Walnut Hill.
Walnut Hill Coffee. So that corner entrance right there, where they kind of have that rounded part of that window. So there used to just be doors. There were double doors on that corner, and you just walked straight into there, and that was Prince Drug Store. But it used to be the Home Bank, H-O-M-E, Home Bank. That was built to be a bank. And there used to be a big tower at the top of that building. It's
I've seen
like a
pictures
round
of
tower,
that,
and it had a clock up there. Now, I don't remember it, but I've seen the pictures. But I can kind of visualize it. But just thinking about how many businesses used to be on the square that are gone, because you used to have, of course, Bluefront Drug Store is still there, and it was there then. And you had Prince Drug Store. And after the Prince family, Randy Bradford owned it, and he had his pharmacy there. And then he later had one in Estill Springs. They had Bradford's pharmacy.
And then when we talked the other day, whenever we were setting all this up, you had said that there was car dealerships on the square.
Yeah. Well, the building,
Which is just crazy to think.
yeah, and there's more than one, but now I don't remember them. But I've seen the old pictures, so I'm not that old. But where I remember Farmers Hardware being would be the building coming off the square, coming this direction, that's been vacant for a long time, that they were going to make an event center out of, or they were doing some work to, replacing the glass and everything up, but still vacant. That was the Farmers Hardware store, but it was constructed and designed to be a car dealer. So I've seen the old pictures of that, and kind of in that front corner of that building, it's covered, but it's open. And you could drive around in that corner, and that was like kind of the showroom floor. And I mean, they probably had a car sitting here, but they could drive cars in the building, and their service department was on the second floor. So there's an old elevator over there that had a big pulley system. You could raise a car up to the second level, and that they worked on them up there, and they sold them on the first level, which I think is really cool.
That's neat.
But you think about it. I mean, you just had to do more with what you had, which I mean, sounds crazy. But we envision the car dealership now. You know, a 20-acre piece of property.
Yep.
And of course, like I said, I guess then it was like
You want to be where the people
They had
are,
all
I
the
guess.
cars inside.
Yeah.
You know, and now it wouldn't be possible. They got acres of cars at some of these places.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think about it. I guess the closest thing I can remember to that would have been like the Honda shop back in the day. I mean, they had that place jam packed full of inventory then.
Yeah. Do you remember the Pioneer equipment when it was at the location where Citizens Bank is on that corner?
No, that was before my time. I've heard many stories about that, but the gem of Pioneer equipment to me was always when it was beside the credit union. Because growing up, Mom and Dad would bank at the credit union, and she'd go in, and I'd be like, "Can I go next door?" You know.
I just thought it was cool here working and growing up here and being able to walk. If you needed something, you could walk to Farmer's Hardware. And then if they didn't have what you wanted, they'd just tell you to go to Nice Hardware. You could walk another block and you go over there. And between those two places, if they didn't have it, you didn't need it. I mean, they had everything. And they would help you. I mean, it's like you walk in there and there'd be somebody knowledgeable. If you're trying to fix your well pump, you don't know what you're calling the part, but you're describing it. And they're, what you need is one of these. And then they'd have it for you. So you don't find things like that. I mean, you go into Home Depot or you go into Walmart and you're probably not going to have anybody try to help you, but if you do, they're not going to know what you need.
Yeah, they don't know.
Unless you have the product number, and then they.
Because my dad was sending me down there for stuff, and I probably forgot on the way down there what he sent me down there for. So then I'm describing it. I'm just like saying.
It's just like you think about it. I mean, and things have changed so much, but everybody can attest to this. I mean, you just think about a parts house. Now you go in and. We do have some good parts houses and parts people.
Yeah.
But the generic thing you think of is, I need windshield wipers for this vehicle. And like, was that 2-wheel drive or 4-wheel drive?
Yeah.
But now, growing up, I can remember the S&T, you'd have a whole wall of 10 foot of a bunch of books. And then a lot of times, and if it was a common vehicle, I need a windshield. Oh, it's an 18 over there, get you to that one.
Yeah, I mean, old S&T, you had Mr. Trussell. You had Mr. Sharber. That's what S&T was for, Sharber and Trussell. But you had Philip Custer.
Yeah.
Philip was in there. And between those three guys, you could go in there and you didn't have to know what you needed. You could tell them what was wrong with your car and they'd tell you what you needed to put on it.
Right.
So I miss things like that.
So
miss those people.
What's something that you would like to see our area, like get, achieve, grow, or I wouldn't use this time, or even regress.
Well, I think change, is inevitable, and that's what we've had to do in our business because it's grown, because the area's grown, and I'm not anti-growth. Do I miss the way it used to be? Yeah, but you know what? We've had a lot of other really good people move in here that I wouldn't have ever got to meet otherwise. So, change isn't all bad. I think sometimes people get aggravated about something and they don't want it just to grow or get any larger, but there's really nothing any of us can do to stop it. So we're just going to have to make the best out of it and adapt. And, I think there's more positive instead of negative that comes out of that. So,
well, I guess I'll finish us off with this. Back to the business part of it, the funeral home. What is something interesting that you might want people to know that y'all do, or that people might not know that you may offer?
Well, I kind of encountered it last night, and I'm always still kind of shocked when it comes up because, of course, obviously everybody knows that we offer cremation because it's becoming more widespread and more popular. But some people don't know that we have a crematory here. And we've had it for 30 years, but it's kind of like, we didn't change our name. Some funeral homes changed their name to, instead of being More Cortner Funeral Home, they'll say More Cortner Funeral Home and Crematory or Cremation Center. But there's still a lot of people here that thought we took the people somewhere else. And when we bought Watson, we acquired another crematory because they had one down there. So some people still don't know that Franklin County has a crematory, but they've actually got two.
Well, and another thing I thought about too was, and it was pointed out to me, was that y'all are all in one. You know, you've got, by all in one, I mean you do the service, you have the granite monument business, you've also got the graveyard. I mean, you can be a one-stop shop, and you don't have to have a lot of moving parts because you can have the ability to do everything.
I think I learned that from Dad because he said it's less to go wrong if you can kind of control all the moving parts. So a lot of funeral homes don't dig their own graves, and they don't have, you know, a backhoe. And in the rare event that something does happen that needs to be changed last minute, it's a lot easier to make a correction or make a change if you've got your own equipment. And my dad kind of likes to control the moving parts, and I guess I kind of got that from him. So we really don't hire anybody to do anything. I mean, we've got the monument company, and we do all the lettering, engraving, we can cut granite. So we got the trucks, the cranes, equipment to handle it, and then the grave service, we do all the aspects of that. We do buy our vaults from a local company, Doric out of Cowan. They produce concrete vaults, but they carry a lot of metal vaults and all the other types, so we support them, and they deliver them to the cemeteries for us, but we set our own, and I'm kind of proud that we do all the parts of the profession.
I think one thing that maybe, and I guess when people come in here, you're not always fully thinking, you know, usually it's probably like you haven't slept in a few days or something, you know, you ask questions. We want to do what you have in mind to honor your loved one, and no request is going to be, I'm not going to say maybe no request, shouldn't say no request is going to be too far out, but we're going to try to do whatever you want to do. And there's so many things now with technology that we can do, whether it's burial or cremation. A lot of people don't realize the amount of services that you can have with cremation. I mean, honestly, you can actually do more because it's more versatile, but because you can go different places. Like over here, this area that we've built over here, and we do caskets over here as well. But I mean, there's just
we have receptions.
Yeah. There's just
events.
There's so many people that, like, family comes out of town. There's very few buildings that people have access to in that quick, how they need it, that they can get.
When your family was up here having the service, y'all had a meal over here where you could kind of take a break from everything, come over and eat. And I mean, that's kind of handy now.
It is handy, and it was fantastic. And you know, Robert was talking about events, and I was just sitting there. I mean, it's a beautiful room and an area, and I'm just sitting here. You know, I'm thinking about, like, people being like, hey, you know, can we have a birthday party at your event?
Yeah.
We have had a few of those. A few anniversary
parties. Had a Christmas party over there. You know, I mean, you can do it however you want it. I mean, we even had a celebration of life where that they wanted an open bar. Yeah. And we were able to accommodate that. You finding a bartender and making sure I'm serving. You jump through some hoops on that. But I mean,
people want things that don't look like what you think of when you think of a funeral home in the church type setting with pews in it. You know, funeral homes kind of look like churches, and people today, they think sometimes they want something more casual. They want something that looks different. So that's this area over here. That's the first comment people usually say. Well, I don't even feel like I'm in a funeral home anymore. This looks different. You know,
well, I think like Robert said. I mean, just ask. I mean, you don't know necessarily what they can do if you don't ask.
Yeah.
One thing about this facility, and I love the rich old history, but it truly doesn't feel like it feels like a home.
Yeah.
Right? And
I get
for being here as much time as you have to be here, I think that's important because you've got the great space that you're just describing. You've also got the chapels. You've got offices spread around everywhere.
It doesn't
feels
work
like a home.
And none of it works. I mean, I guess in a way this is any business, but particularly ours, it's relationship based. And I know we talked about that a little bit in the beginning about just being there for people, but you can't just go build a big fancy nice building and say I'm going to open up a funeral home if you don't treat people the way they want to be treated
because
with respect.
Because the people that are here and the people that are interacting with them, that's what makes you different.
Yeah. I mean,
no matter how good your building is, you don't have good people.
You got to be in this for the right reason, and it's service based. And And I really feel like, we've been blessed to be able to accommodate with this facility in certain ways, but I really believe even if it was just the original home, I think that our numbers would be pretty close because at the end of the day, it's about relationships in this business.
When we did expand and got the other location in town, that building was built in the 90s and it was built and designed just to be a funeral home. And there's a lot of advantages to that, but that building has a different feel than this building. And when we bought it, it had some similarities in furniture and decorations to try to mimic what this building looks like. But when we bought it, we changed everything and we painted it, and we wanted a different, more casual look really over there on the interior. And it's more modern, and you got the best of both worlds. If you want tradition, we've got that here, but when we come over on this part in the family area over here, the family life center, it looks different than the old traditional funeral home. But Watson's is in its own. I mean, if you like what there it is over there, we got that. And if you want here, we got that. So I think it's two big distinct differences in the two places.
I want to ask one more question because it's I don't know the answer to this, and I bet the people out there don't. In the funeral home business, like you mentioned, Jennings, right, and more Cortner. When somebody takes that over, is that traditional to keep the original name and just add a second name after it?
It is, and some people don't even add their name to it. And so our idea behind the Watson and renaming it from Watson North back to Watson is just because we kind of love history. And my dad and Roy Watson were competitors in the funeral business, but they were partners in the cemetery business. Roy Watson owned 50% of Franklin Memorial Gardens on the County Highway, and my dad owned the other half.
Right.
And that's not been done really many places. And the public really did like that they got along together, and they were partners in that business. And they were competitive, but they were gentlemen and they were friendly. They went to the same church. They used to go to the conventions together. They even changed their hearses to make sure they were the same colors because they wanted to share equipment. So they said, hey, we don't need different color cars. Let's make them be the same. So when we're borrowing it, people don't even know. Just change the name plates, change the name on them. So we want to name it Watson Funeral Home back to the old history tie back with Roy Watson because he was a good friend and business partner, and we kind of wanted to preserve that history, that name.
That's incredible.
It's been a learning experience for me. I can't thank y'all enough for coming on.
Thank you for having us.